Nerdiest Prime.
Hi, welcome to Nerdiest Prime, where we are reviewing every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, but we're skipping ahead to Season 5 because this is a companion review to Lower Decks' final episode of Season 4, which was called Old Friends, New Planets? I hope? Yes. So, here we are, reviewing The First Duty, Season 5.
The Enterprise arrives at Earth so Picard can give the Starfleet Academy commencement address and meet up with an old friend, beloved know-it-all, Wesley Crusher. But oh no, there has been an accident. Wesley and some cocky classmates smash their spaceships into each other, and one of them, named Josh, has died. Now, an admiral and a Vulcan captain conduct a hearing to find out what happened. Picard and Dr. Crusher visit with Wes to see how he's doing, but are interrupted by squad leader Nick Locarno, a charismatic douchebag who tries to convince Wesley and the other members to stick to their BS story that covers up the fact that they were attempting a dangerous and prohibited stunt. They are all terrible liars, and everyone can tell they are hiding the truth. But since Picard's walking and talking lie detector, Deanna Troi, is conspicuously absent most of the episode, the assembled onlookers have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Picard seeks out groundskeeper Boothby, an old gardener who likes to bitch and moan a lot, and dispense sage wisdom to troubled cadets, including Picard in his younger days. He points Picard to Locarno as a born leader who could convince anyone to follow him, even off a cliff. The cadets get tripped up when presented with a blurry screen grab that counters their sworn testimony. Picard knows what they were trying to do, the Culvert starburst, and gives Wesley a severe tongue lashing in his ready room. If he can't tell the truth, he has no right to wear those cargo pocketed space pajamas. The rest of the team are good with throwing old poor Josh under the warp nacelles as the one who caused the accident. But Wesley can't live with disappointing Captain Picard, and Josh's dad gave Wesley back his missing ugly sweater, so he feels he owes him one. Wesley tells the truth that Locarno had roped them into trying a dangerous illegal stunt. Locarno gets expelled as the chief conspirator and put on the path to future villainy, and Wesley is punished by having to repeat the second grade at space camp. While Troi finally shows up and is like, "What did I miss?"
Okay, so let's talk about our first impressions. And what really our first impressions, just our impressions. We've probably seen this episode like about 85 times. What is your 85th impression of this episode, Jenny?
Well, so as a teenage Wesley fan, I watched all the Wesley episodes a lot. So, and this episode in particular was so great because it was like, you get to see him doing his own thing, you know? But it was like stressful because he was doing his own thing wrong and he wasn't like being the guy that he was supposed to be. Anyway, so I really, really like this episode, but I also always stressed out by it because I like time travel back to being like 13 and watching it and being like, no, Wesley, no, not another year till you're back on the show. What? Oh no. So, yeah, but I love this episode for a lot of reasons. The whole thing where Crusher and Picard are kind of like doing this like unspoken co-parenting thing with him is like amazing. How they just like both show up at his dorm room. Sorry, that's a very like small thing, but it's just, that end of things I feel like is very, I don't know. It's like, it feels real. Like it feels like, you know, the parents showing up and you're at school, but like things are kind of like not so great. And you're, you know, anyway, it's, I'm not finishing my sentences. Okay. I'm a big fan of this episode, bottom line.
You like this episode? Okay, great.
Yeah, this is also like peak Picard. Picard in this is wonderful.
I've always liked this episode. Yeah, and it's probably been a while since I watched it, so this was nice to watch it again. Because yeah, it's very relatable. Like it's not a weird science fiction out there premise. It's very grounded. It's something that, you know, could happen hear today with anyone. So it's very relatable in that, like, if you're gonna have somebody who didn't watch Star Trek watch this, like they would be able to relate to it despite it being in the 24th century. It's nice in that respect. But yeah, and I also like that we're getting a different side of Wesley. Like, prior to this, he had all the answers. He's always saving the day. It got kind of irritating. You know, he was always the wonder kid who saved his ship and saved all the adults. And this one, you find him like fallible, and he felt more like his actual age, where, you know, he's making mistakes, he's growing, he's learning, he's getting into trouble. So it was nice to see that, because Wesley was a bit irritating, and in this one he's more relatable, and you can, you know, and all the courtroom stuff was great. I love a good courtroom drama in Star Trek. Like you say, again, this is peak Picard too. The fact, you know, that he's a father figure to Wesley. It was nice to see all that stuff. So there's so much good stuff in this episode. It's just fantastic all around. And we get introduced to a young Robert Duncan McNeil, who will be part of Star Trek Voyager, and we love Tom Paris / Nick Locarno.
Okay, Namir.
Yeah, you know, I remember this episode when it first came out, and to be honest, I didn't like it. Like, I didn't, because I was young. I wanted aliens and space battles and the Borg and all that stuff, and I was like, oh, another courtroom drama. But then, subsequently when I watched it, I just liked it more and more. Because it's really well done. Like, it's good TV, right? Like, the characters are great. Picard is really great. I think he's got one of the best, like, Picard speeches that I've heard in this episode. Wesley is not annoying, you know, until kind of the end, where you're like, but he's like a good solid character. You know, the story is really great. There's some intrigue, and Star Trek generally does courtroom drama really well, which is kind of weird, but this was no exception. It was a really, really well done episode, and it's one of the episodes that for me stands out in the series.
Yeah, I mean, I love this episode. I remember watching it when it came out in '92, and it was great then, and it's great when I watched it again for this review, and I just think it's I mean, just to second what you said, Jenny, like, I don't understand people who don't like Wesley Crusher. I mean, I sort of understand, like, how people didn't like him in the first season, but, like, everybody was bad in the first season. Like, it's not like Wesley Crusher specifically was bad, and he was fine after that, and Will Wheaton is such a good actor. Will Wheaton is, like, on par with Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner. I mean, and everybody else in the cast is really good, but, you know, they're, like, top-notch, and especially considering he's, like, so young, you know what I mean? Like, he's 14, 15, 16, going toe-to-toe with Patrick Stewart. I mean, yeah, anyways. And this is great stuff. I mean, for all the same reasons you guys said, like, it's Wesley, but it's Wesley getting in trouble. It's out of the box. It's not him going like, look, I made a little gadget that tells me that Captain Picard is talking to me, and look, I can lift up a chair with the reflector beam, you know, like, these kinds of things. It's like he's a repulsor beam. Yeah. That's a repulsor, not a reflector beam. Thank you, Jenny. So basically, I mean, the plot of the episode is they get called back to Earth, and there's been an accident, and Picard and the crew are investigating the accident, and you kind of find out that there's been this cover-up, and you don't quite understand what the cover-up is, but you get the sense that that Wesley's not totally telling the truth, and I find that really interesting because, I mean, we'll get into this more into the review, but there's a fundamental, it's really a Wesley episode. There's a fundamental conflict in Wesley, or dilemma, which is, where's his loyalty? Is his loyalty to a Nova Squadron, or is it to Picard? Is it, like, to his past, or is it to his present? Is it to, like, the truth, or is it to loyalty of, you know, his peers? And I mean, and I know that the staff, when they wrote the episode, they were debating themselves what he should do. And I think that they made the right choice in terms of what Wesley did. And I mean, anyways, I could go on and on, but I really like this episode for that reason. I guess. What do you guys think about the plot? It's kind of silly to think about the plot because there's not really a plot kind of episode, although it kind of is. But
it's all plot. What are you talking about?
But I know it's plot, but I think it's like for me, it's all character. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but like stuff happens.
No, there is a plot, but it's less like anyways.
No, but that okay. Look, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's good TV, right? Like the plot complements the character development and vice versa, right? Like we complain when it's just plot and it's just character development, right? But this episode is so well written that they kind of mesh together, right? Like the plot drives the changes in Wesley and the things that he learns and all of that stuff, right? Like it really is like, to me, it feels like peak Star Trek. Which is funny because it doesn't take place in space, right? It takes place on on Earth, right? But it really feels like everything that Star Trek is about is in this episode, and that comes across in the plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it kind of reminds me of Star Trek 4 in that way, because Star Trek 4 is such a good movie, but it's all on Earth, and there's not a lot of space stuff in it. And so for me, I'm always a little conflicted. I love the movie so much, but there's not a lot of space stuff in it. And if only there was more space stuff, But in this episode, it doesn't feel that way. Because, the show has space stuff all the time, but you rarely go back to Earth. So it's really great to see Earth. It's really great to see the Starfleet Academy and all that kind of stuff. Alan, plot.
Good. Are we just using one word? Plot. Good. It's a good plot. I feel like I've mentioned in our group chat that it's kind of funny that all of our telepaths are conveniently not present. Deanna Troi, our walking, talking lie detector, is just oddly not present. Because a lot of this plot hinges on people actually believing what they're saying. Well, it's funny because they're in the future in a Federation where there's tons of telepathic aliens and ways to find out. They're telling the truth.
But also, like they establish in Court Martial that you put your hand on a little thing and then Major Barrett tells you if you're a liar or not.
I know, right? You got to hand wave all that stuff away and just, but nuts and bolts of it. It is really intriguing. I like the mystery. I like, the progression of finding out what they did. Because you really, when you don't know what, I mean, again, we've watched this a zillion times, but when you don't know what's going on, you're like, what would make Wesley, lie to Captain Picard and in front of Starfleet because he's such a goody two shoes. So you're really intrigued to find out more. So I feel like, despite the fact it's a talky episode, like I was really riveted by it the whole time. Even watching it for the zillionth time, I was riveted again. So it's really well written and really, really well done.
I agree with what the previous gentlemen have said. I think honestly, my only complaint with this episode is that Beverly, once again, she's there and she's involved, but in a very like mom way. And that's basically all she has to do. She's just kind of there to like worry and sit next to Picard. And that has always kind of like bugged me. But I mean, that's a common problem with how she was written on TNG. So yeah, I mean, it's not enough to like take away from the episode because it is a great episode. It's just something that's always just kind of like, God, why is she even there? Because yeah,
my one problem with this episode is the visual effects of the little fighters. It looks like Amiga 3D rendering or something. It's like. Suddenly, whenever we're watching the little fighters, it's like, is this Babylon 5? Like, what are we watching here?
It just looks like it's like the classroom computer. Yeah.
I think that the fact that I don't care about the fact that they're breaking rules of continuity of there's a little lie detector thing in courtroom dramas in past episodes and there's not one here.
That's also, I mean, that's a court-martial, and this is just, wasn't this like just a preliminary hearing? Like it wasn't even.
It was. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
but
it was an
the
inquiry.
But the point I'm trying to make is that if the show is good and it's well written, then there's always little things, but I'll forgive those things because it's so well written. It's so internally consistent, and the drama is good, and I'm involved in it. So who gives a crap about that stuff?
Interesting.
And I'm usually more going to be complaining about technobabble stuff or continuity if I don't like the episode. What are you saying, Jenny? I feel like you're saying something.
No, I'm like, that is that is very interesting given your history of analysis.
As in what we just talked about 20 minutes ago.
Consistently the case.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is I didn't like that. I didn't like the other episode that connects to this episode.
Right.
I don't like the lower deck, so that's why I was complaining about all those things because I didn't like the episode. But if I'd liked the episode, then I might not have been complaining about those things because I was enjoying myself. But the other thing is that, like what Alan says, like the fact that we've all seen this episode, like I don't know how many times, and it's still exciting and I'm still looking forward to the Picard speech, and I'm still looking forward to like him meeting Boothby, and what's so great about this episode also is that there's so much continuity in terms of going back to the relationship of Wesley and Picard. So the first duty connects to the final mission. And then it also connects to Samaritan Snare, where he talks about Boothby for the first time, and we finally get to see Boothby, and now it connects forward to Lower Decks, the season 7 episode, and then Lower Decks connects to Lower Decks the TV show, and now we have an episode in Lower Decks the TV show that connects back to this episode with Nick Locarno and so on and so forth.
And it connects to Journey's End.
Yes, exactly. Which is another great Wesley episode, exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of his progression.
Because the Wesley we see in Journey's End is very much impacted by what's happened to him in this episode, among other things. Yeah.
And I noticed that the two things that this episode and Lower Decks, the episode Lower Decks has in common is like the Cedo. Is that Cedo is in this episode and Cedo is in that episode. But the other thing that connects those two episodes are Canadian references. Because this episode has a mention of Calgary and how he went to Calgary with Josh to go skiing.
I found this in Josh's room. Josh and I went to Calgary last month. He forgot his sweater, so we borrowed one of mine.
And then in Lower Decks, the episode Lower Decks, Lavelle has a Canadian grandfather and thinks that Riker is Canadian, which is, I remember seeing that episode and him mentioning that, and I was like, oh, Canada, so good.
My grandfather was Canadian, you know.
Really?
Aren't you one too?
A grandfather?
No, Canadian, sir, Canadian.
No, I grew up in Alaska.
Oh.
Okay.
So now
So proud.
And now we have a whole other like connection. Those two episodes now connect because of Lower Deck, the TV show. So fantastic. So
Where did they go skiing in Calgary?
And everybody knows what good.
The prairies.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah.
What?
Where did they go skiing in Calgary? It's the prairies. It's very flat there.
Well,
the prairies? It's Alberta. What are you talking about?
The prairies are. Have you been to
Calgary's like an hour from the mountains.
Yeah. No. They had the winter games there. They had the Winter Olympics there in Calgary.
Edmonton's in the middle of nowhere.
But there's still no mountains there to go skiing on. I'm saying.
I'm sure there's. I mean, it's the future. Maybe they just made mountains.
They should have said
transported a giant mountain there.
Listen, in the future, you would go to Calgary and you get in a little space shuttle, and the space shuttle would get you to the mountains in like 5 minutes.
That's the spirit, Lucas. Yes.
I guess. I just feel like it's
You
American
fill in
writers
those
who
blanks.
don't know Canadian geography. That's all I'm saying.
Can I tell you my favorite part of that scene where he meets Josh's dad is that Josh's dad gives him back that ugly green sweater that Wesley wears for
I don't want this in my
like yeah. And you're like, oh my god, that's the ugly green sweater he always wears.
Is it the actual green sweater that you see him in season 1 or season 2?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, this sweater. I guess I'm taking this ugly thing back.
This sweater.
I know.
It doesn't even fit me anymore.
That's it's like a couple Christmas balls from being an ugly Christmas sweater. It's like ugly green, like it is a very ugly sweater.
Wes, I know you want to protect his memory. We all do. But we have to look out for ourselves now. What do you want us to do? Walk in there and tell them everything that happened?
Now, Nick Locarno was introduced in this episode, which up until the recent Lower Decks episode was never seen again, except that he's basically like Tom Paris. And so in some way, in spirit, Nick Locarno lives on in Voyager for 7 years. So let's talk about Robert Duncan McNeil's performance as Nick Locarno. And let's then talk about his legacy.
His performance, he was great. He's very charismatic. He's a nice looking fellow. I thought he and Will Wheaton had some good chemistry because, and he was very, I don't know, he sold it. Like he was great in that role and made us believe, made it clear why Wesley, who we, know to be a reasonable, rule-following
stand-up guy.
Yeah, why he would do this, why he would follow this guy. And I think that was very important. It was an important role because in the wrong hands or with with a character that wasn't that, they wouldn't have been able to sell it, like it had to make sense why Wesley would do this. So I think he was the right person in the right role, written the right way.
Yeah, I think he like, just echoing what Jenny was saying, he's kind of the perfect actor for the role. Like, because it could have gone south really quickly, right? Like, because he's sympathetic. You kind of almost understand where he's coming from. You're almost a little bit on his side. You're like, how bad could it have been, right? But if you were to just read the script without an actor portraying it, you would have been like, oh, this guy is like evil, right?
Yeah.
Like this is not good. But he does it in a way that's super subtle, and you're like, yeah, you like him, right? That's kind of the problem, is that you like him, and he's, you could see him being a great captain, after he graduates. And, in some ways, I feel like Picard may have been a little bit like Locarno when he was in the Academy, because there's definitely those parallels. So I think his portrayal is really part of why this episode is so memorable and why that character is so memorable, right? Like, we remember Locarno, like 20 years later when he shows up in Lower Decks, right? And it's about, Robert Duncan McNeil's portrayal of him. It's just really well done.
It's 30 years later.
30 years.
30, oh my God. Oh, Jesus.
I know, it's horrific.
I wish it was 20 years later. 20 years
I just
20
got
years
a
ago,
bag of Werther's.
2003.
He's ready for the seniors home.
I don't understand that reference. I don't understand what you're talking about.
No.
Alan, what do you think about Nick Locarno in this episode?
Oh, everybody already said so many good things that I agree with, so I don't know what to add. But yeah, he's a lovable asshole. He's one of those guys that he's manipulative and a jerk, kind of like self-righteous and all these things.
He's a bro. That's what he is. He's a
bro, yeah. He says the right things, at the right time to the right people, and he's just kind of cool, so everybody respects him, even though, he's totally leading people down the wrong path. He's just one of those people and we meet him, and everybody has met someone like him.
I feel like Al and I have worked with those people.
Yeah, we have.
Television.
Yeah.
How many producers can I name that are just exactly like that?
Oh my god.
You're like, all of them.
Charismatic, asshole, leads me down the wrong path. Oh.
Yeah.
This is the preliminary report from your flight recorder. It was damaged so badly in the crash that the lab could only retrieve a third of the total telemetry from the recorder. And all of it is before the collision. There's no problem here.
Dare I say that Robert Duncan McNeil's performance in this episode is the best he's ever done, and is a better performance, I believe, than Tom Paris.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense
Yes,
to me.
ma'am.
Like, this character's pretty complicated. Like, Tom Paris is kind of straightforward, like he's like Han Solo-ish a little bit, right? But Locarno's a little bit more complicated than that, right? He's not quite the same character, and he has to be played with some subtlety. So yeah, I would buy that.
I mean, I think there's probably a couple things. I think one, the fact that Tom Paris was somebody he had to play every day, all the time, and he just had to get through these lines and through the scripts. Like it was his job. But when he did Nick Locarno, he wasn't a regular. Like, he had all his time to rehearse and like think about his character and how I'm going to play this thing and the subtle thing and whatever. Like, he had all that prep time. He was hungry, and, all that sort of stuff. So I think he brought a lot of that. Probably, this is just my own interpretation. But also, I think there's a bit like what you said, Namir. I think the character's a little meatier. He's got layers, and Tom Paris is sort of got layers, but the basic, it's like he's a big onion with a couple of layers on top, and the big onion, he's like a nice swell guy who's misunderstood. And Nick Locarno is not. He's not a misunderstood person. He's like an asshole, right?
I can't believe you would say that Nick Locarno is Robert Duncan McNeil's like peak acting when he was Warp 10 lizard taking his tongue out of his mouth. That was
not a lizard,
peak Robert Duncan McNeil.
salamander.
That was really good.
The past is the future. The future is the past.
Yes. See, no, that's not Locarno. It's that lizard Warp 10 lizard man. That's peak McNeil.
The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, whether it's scientific truth or historical truth or personal truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. Now, if you can't find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth about what happened, you don't deserve to wear that uniform.
This episode is amazing for the Picard speech and the Picard moments. And there's this amazing speech he gives to Wesley Crusher in the ready room. Oh, I could just listen to that speech on a repeat. Yeah. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth.
These kinds of truth. It's really great seeing Picard wrestling with this. He knows it's wrong. He has this relationship with Wesley. He doesn't want to throw him to the wolves. He wants him to do the right thing. Picard is the guy that can talk people into anything, he really is Nick Locarno. Wait a minute. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, because he is.
But it sounds like something similar happened to him when he was at Starfleet Academy, because there's a moment between him and Boothby.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah.
Sorry, he knows what he's talking about, right? I think he's really in this episode. This is the episode where you're like, oh yeah, Picard is Wesley's surrogate dad, right? That's what it's about. So he's like, don't make the mistakes that I made, do the right thing. And so that's kind of what the speech is about, right? It's like, Wesley doesn't know it, but we know it, that Picard probably did something similar in his past, right? Which is cool because they don't really talk about the details, and I don't think we ever learn what that thing is that happened.
No.
But it doesn't matter.
That's what makes great writing, is the subtlety of it. You don't have to like have a thing and it's like, and Maman, this would happen, and blah blah blah, and all that stuff. You can just go, hey.
Yeah, thank you.
Why do
Thank
I feel
you.
this is about Picard season 2?
Because it's about Picard season 1 and 2.
I'm just illustrating the difference between writing in this episode and writing in other episodes that are not as good as this episode.
Go on.
It's true.
Alan, you jump in now. Diffuse this.
Yeah, I always look forward to that scene because it's like, oh, I get goosebumps when Picard comes down hard on Wesley because you don't see it coming, really. I mean, you feel like he needs it, but you don't see Picard really come, like, because he's a father figure to Wesley, but it's always kind of been a guiding hand. Like at first, like he even talks about his I hated the fact that you were in my chair, that you were like this little twerp that come on my bridge and irritated me. But then, you see Samaritan Snare and Final Mission, and they really had this very close father-son bond, and you really never see that tested until now, where, he's gotta like, okay, we're not around anymore. Like, you are walking down a very bad, dangerous path, and I need to scare you straight. Oh, and I think even Wesley's like taken aback, it's like, oh God, like, geez, and then he really, and then he's like, but then, then he's got this like struggle between two really charismatic, compelling influences on him, and then one's telling him, it's like, just say Captain Picard doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, I can't call Captain Picard a liar, it's like, oh, it's so good. So much good drama in this episode.
Can I say that? And I know we don't want to harp on Picard, but like the show Picard, but that's the thing that really bothered me about the entire 3 seasons, is that Wesley is like a non-character, right? But he's so important to Picard, right? Like that relationship, to me, is like fundamental to TNG, right? Like, and over the years it kind of goes away, but it's still always there. And to not have any closure around that just feels like a huge missed opportunity. And I think they tried to do that in the 3rd season with his other son, but it just wasn't the same.
There was that one scene in season 2, and then it solved everything. And I was like, oh, thank God they had that, and now I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't know, like that to me, that relationship was always so good, right? Like Wesley was there to make Picard realize that he could be a father, right? Like to kind of open up that side of him. And then that's such a perfect storyline for like retired Picard in his old age to kind of lean on, and they didn't do it. And I was like, I was so sure they were going to bring back Wesley in a meaningful way, and they just didn't. It made me so upset.
I don't know. Having it meet like the Traveler thing is tough how do you like walk that back?
But you don't have to walk it back. It's just harder to write esoteric, life-changing drama than it is to write pew 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 pew. And I think so that's what they tend to lean more towards, because it's easy to write, But when they do it well, like Where No One Has Gone Before, it's really good, And dare I say, the motion picture, And I think there's a perception somewhere that like, oh, we can't do that. That stuff is boring. And so they tend to like go this way. And I think at this point, Wesley Crusher's plot to honor that would have to be more in that direction. And I think in this day and age of streaming and trying to grab eyeballs, they're not going to do like a deep, like metaphysical journey through time and space. Unfortunately, because
I don't know. It's science fiction. They can do whatever the hell they want, right? Like it's not that hard, right? I mean, I don't know. It's confusing.
Yeah.
But we don't need to talk about that show anymore. The unnamed show.
Jenny wants to talk about it. We can talk about it one time. Not today, but some other time.
Not today. Not today.
But not today.
All right. I have another complaint about this episode, and it's very, very small.
Go.
That Vulcan should have mind melded Locarno and figured out the truth.
Nope. Way smaller. Way smaller. It has always really bothered me that the door to Wesley's dorm has a handle. It's always driven me crazy. Always. Every time I see this episode, I'm like, God, that handle. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it really does. Do with that what you will.
I always thought it kind of made sense, because they were junior cadets, so they don't deserve a sliding door.
But it's Starfleet.
No, they got to learn how to open it.
They could just replicate the door.
They have to learn how to open the door. That's part of their education. It's if everything is just served to them on a silver platter, they're not going to learn anything. You got to make them work for their education. Open that door. Learn what a door is.
I'm not buying it. Listen, I am the queen of the headcanon, and I still cannot get on board with this doorknob. And I've done this. I've literally done this for 30 years where I'm just no, it's fine. That's just the kind of door that they have there. And I'm I have those doorknobs in my apartment right now. I'm not okay with that.
All right. Here's one of my questions about this episode is,
okay,
if the starburst maneuver was prohibited because people died 100 years ago, why is he attempting to do it? Because if he successfully does it at the commencement, isn't he going to get real big shit? Picard thinks, maybe he thought he was going to wow the audience or whatever. But I feel like it'd be oh, you just did something completely illegal and dangerous, and now we're going to expel you. I'm trying to figure out why they were doing this, because it was a prohibited thing.
Maybe it had, was something that had been done every year for 75 years, and then finally there were 5 accidents all in a 10-year period, and they were all right, that's it, we got to stop doing this is crazy. But it was such a big deal, and it had been such a big deal, and then they're we're going to bring this back, and it's going to be amazing.
Just get in as much trouble doing it and surprising everybody as you would.
I don't think he would have gone in
killing someone.
I don't think I think they were making a calculation that it would be so impressive and everybody would be so amazed that they just get a slap on the wrist or a note on their permanent record, but that it would be worth it.
And actually, now in retrospect, when I think about Locarno, when I think about Locarno's big plan in Lower Decks, I feel that actually is very now it's even more in character for given that this was his plan.
It's about him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I think I've heard other people bring this up before about what was really his plan? He was going to get in trouble either way. But I could see that he might believe, people all the time do stuff that 100 years ago was banned. I'm well, that's 100 years ago. That was a long time ago, whatever. And also they can talk themselves into thinking, well, and they're not wrong, that if they're good enough or the thing's impressive enough, then people are just going to go they'll forgive him for the thing, they'll get a slap on the wrist. And
seems like a big risk.
Starfleet does have a tendency to do that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then what does he have as example is Captain Kirk stealing the Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
So he could just go, wow, technically I'm just kind of doing what Kirk does, yeah. So. So one thing I really like about this episode is how the Enterprise crew immediately are we're going to help Wesley. We're going to investigate this thing. We're going to figure it out. And they're doing basically what they do in every episode, except in this particular case, Wesley's no, don't investigate. Don't investigate. And it kind of puts them in this real dilemma, this real life dilemma that is so human to everybody, where we all kind of wish, well, sometimes I'll speak about myself. I go through times in my life where I go, I don't want to deal with this inconvenient truth or deal with this situation. And then the truth forces itself upon me. Eventually I have to do the thing. And that's what I really like about Picard in this episode, where he says, either you tell the truth or I will, you know, and it really puts like so much pressure on Wesley, but it's really good pressure. Like it's like the kind of pressure that I would wish that, you know, people in those positions would put me in, not the other kind of pressure, you know, where I makes me a better person, basically, you know. So this is my question for the three of you. How do we feel about Wesley's decision at the end to, quote unquote, you know, betray his colleagues and choose the truth?
I think the original lie was the betrayal in the first place, and I think he did the right thing.
Well said.
And I'm super proud of him. When I was 13, I was like, yes, Wesley.
Yeah, I mean, I think on one hand, I'm like, yeah, Wesley did the right thing, but on the other hand, I'm kind of like, he kind of did the cowardly thing. Like he did the spineless, easy thing, right? He didn't come up with that option on his own.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically like forced into a corner by Picard, right? And Picard's like, if you don't say anything, I'll say something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that you're screwed. And so at that point, Wesley didn't have a choice. I think for him, it would have been better for his character if he had decided to do that on his own, right? Because even Locarno said it at the end, right? Like Locarno's like, you know, if you really believe this, you would resign, right? If you really believed that what we were doing was wrong, you should resign, but don't make that decision for the rest of us. And I kind of understand it, you know, like I kind of get it. So Wesley, to me, I think everyone's like, oh, he did the right thing. He's so brave, but I don't think he had a choice. He had to do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's just basically a kid, and that's what kids do. They find themselves in those kind of predicaments, and Picard as like a stand-in for his dad is trying to encourage him to make the right choice, you know, and he's basically sitting there in the courtroom just like, have I made a difference, you know, is he going to do the right thing? And I think it's a good little test, you know, that he's giving Wesley to see if he'll do the right thing. I can't complete my thought because I don't know what I'm saying anymore, but it's, yeah. He didn't want to disappoint Picard in the end because that's his dad, and kids don't really want to disappoint their parents, you know. I think generally speaking, so I think that was the only thing he could do in that situation. I mean, he tried to take the cowardly easy way out and lie and throw his deceased friend under the bus and say it was his fault, he screwed up, we're all good. But then, you know, he knew that Picard had it figured out, and he didn't want to disappoint him, so he had to make that decision to honor that relationship.
I don't think that that's what it is. I mean, it could be that, but what I think is that Wesley realized at that moment that he had a path, and the path was, is he going to be basically a good person or a bad person? And he couldn't pretend to be a good person anymore if he was going to lie about it and called Captain Picard a liar. Because Picard basically, to Wesley and to me, represents like a good person. So if I can be like anybody in life, I would be like Captain Picard. But so if it was between me and Captain Picard and a decision, I was like, I'm going to eat like potato chips, but Picard doesn't like that, I'm going to think about it twice. Like, well, maybe I'm going to put those away and I'm going to have some Earl Grey tea.
Pick a Werther's.
Okay, let's talk about our final thoughts for this episode and our rating out of 10. Let's start with Jenny.
I mean, I don't know what else I have to say because, like I said, I've come back to the well on this one many, many times because the Wesley scraps were always so few and far between, you know? So, it was a great evolution of his character. You know, not great in that he didn't necessarily do all the right things, but great in just making him a more complex, interesting character. Overall, great episode. I do wish Beverly had something more to do in some capacity, because I do find her sort of, it's very weird that she's there and then kind of not. I mean, she's there, but it's, anyway. So that all said, adding in the doorknob problem, I feel like I would give this episode a strong, like a strong 8. I'm trying to like place it in my overall feelings about Star Trek episodes in general, or TNG episodes in general. So yeah, I'm gonna say an 8. I might take that back at some point. I have to. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of episodes.
In an unusual turn of events, I'm gonna give a higher rating than Jenny did for an episode, and I'm gonna give this one a 9, because there's really nothing like bad I can say about this episode, other than the fact that a quick walkthrough by Troy would have solved this problem, but she's conspicuously absent through the whole thing.
Sketchiness.
Sensing deception, Captain. But yeah, I mean, it's just so well written. The characters are relatable. We didn't really talk about Ray Walston as Boothby, but he was a great guest star. And him being a simple groundskeeper, yet kind of like the wise Obi-Wan of Starfleet Academy is. It was just such a great guest character, very memorable role, and I love his his cranky personality. But yeah, there's really nothing bad I can say about this episode. I mean, it's top tier TNG, but yeah, I would give this a 9 out of 10. Loved it.
Yeah, so I enjoyed the episode. I thought it was, it's well written. It's great. TNG. I think the more that I think about it and the more we talk about it, the more I think that Wesley kind of like weaseled his way out of getting in trouble. Like I think the much more interesting thing for him to do would have been to resign, like to stand on what he believes and, really kind of drive home that he's growing as a person. But instead, he just kind of let Picard make the decision for him, right? Like, I actually don't think he really had a choice. So I kind of don't respect him as much as I did before we started talking about it. Now I'm just like, now I kind of like Locarno more than I like Wesley, which is totally weird. It's not like a place where I expect it to be. But here we are. Well, but he did, like his motivations were, kind of off. But in the end, he did the right thing, right? Like he stood by his beliefs, and Wesley kind of didn't. Like I think that if Picard had not given him that speech, Wesley would have just let the whole thing go, right? That he would have been like, "Oh, we got away with it. I feel a little bit bad, but we got away with it," But Picard basically said, if you don't do this, I'm cutting you off, right? Like that was sort of the implication, and Wes couldn't take that. And that's the only reason why he stood up at the end and sort of admitted to the whole thing, which I can't respect. I can't do it. Obviously he's not a real person, but
I'm a real person.
And I don't respect you, Wesley.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so
you're a traveler.
What's your rating?
Let's give it an 8.
That's
I'll
fair.
give it an 8. There you go.
I will give it also give it an 8 out of 10. I love this episode. I think it's fantastic. Super well written. The only reason it doesn't get a 10 or a 9 is that there are so many good episodes of Next Generation that fall into that category. If I gave this a 10, I'd have to give those ones like 15s out of 10. So it's not in outer space. That's one thing I didn't like about it. Oh, hello, Jenny's cat. And so I gave it an 8 out of 10.
And Lucas is done. Okay. That was Nerdiest Prime. Like and subscribe.